Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. A couple of weeks ago, we ran an update looking into how AMD's Zen 4 CPU launch fared, and today I'm back with, well, basically the same thing, but this time looking at Intel's Raptor Lake launch. These have been the two big CPU launches of 2022, and after analysing some of the numbers, it's pretty clear that one release has gone a lot better than the other. So we're about a week and a half on from the launch of Intel's 13th generation Raptor Lake series, which so far has included 3 K-SKU processors and 3 very similar KF-SKU models without integrated graphics. While the Core i9-13900K was a bit of a fizzer due to its high power consumption and thermals, the Core i7-13700K and Core i5-13600K both turned out to be genuinely great options with strong gaming performance, excellent productivity capabilities, and decent value on the LGA 1700 platform. The first step to a successful launch is, of course, actually making a good product, and Intel have definitely done that this generation. The big question mark surrounding Intel's 13th gen was whether the limited upgrade path for the platform would hold back sales. After all, if you're buying a new 600 or 700 series motherboard for a new Raptor Lake CPU, that's basically the end of the line for you, as Intel is expected to move to a new socket and platform with their 14th generation. Throughout the AM4 generation, this lack of platform longevity for Intel caused headaches, as those already on AMD's platform could upgrade their CPU without much hassle, whereas in most cases, Intel upgrades were more difficult and costly. But in 2022, we're in a bit of a different situation, as both AMD and Intel are trying to tempt users across to their basically new platforms. We've got AMD with AM5 and Intel with LGA 1700. Sales for AM5 CPUs were disappointing at launch and continue to be fairly weak due to a variety of factors, but that's not the case for Intel. Raptor Lake has been one of Intel's better launches in recent years, and buyers looking for that full platform upgrade are choosing Intel over AMD on the majority of occasions. The strengths of CPUs such as the 13600K are proving to be tempting for buyers, and these strengths are outweighing some of the cons, such as platform longevity, which is something that does make sense, as we've discussed in some of our recent Q&A episodes. As far as hard numbers are concerned, Tech Epiphany on Twitter continues to do a great job of collecting sales figures from Mindfactory in Germany. Comparing the Raptor Lake launch to the Ryzen 7000 launch across a similar time frame, Intel sold 40 to 50% more units of their new CPUs, so 13th gen only LJ 1700 parts. That's quite a large discrepancy, and while AM5 sales have fallen away quickly after its launch earlier in the month, Raptor Lake is still going relatively strong in its second week of availability. Right now at Mindfactory, there are 4 13th gen SKUs outselling the most popular AM5 part. This increased level of interest in Intel processors is having an impact on Amazon sales as well. When we looked at Ryzen 7000 a week and a half post-launch, there were no parts sitting inside the top 10 on the best-selling CPUs list. The best part was the 7950X in 18th position. But with Intel, the Core i5-13600K is sitting in a strong 4th place, while the 13700K is in 8th. The KF models of these SKUs are also sitting nicely inside the top 20. In fact, if you combined the 13600K and 13600KF positions, I'm sure Intel's Raptor Lake Core i5 offering would move up a few places. So when we just compare 13th gen sales to AM5 sales, why is Intel currently in the lead for those looking at a bleeding edge processor? Well, one reason is, of course, the products themselves. Specifically in the key battles between Core i5 and Ryzen 5 and Core i7 versus Ryzen 7, Intel simply has the more compelling CPU right now, which we covered extensively in our reviews. But to simplify things here, the Core i5-13600K offers similar gaming performance to the Ryzen 5 7600X while smashing it in productivity performance. Buyers after a CPU around that $300 price point are getting a more well-rounded, balanced part from the 13600K. And it's a similar story with the 13700K. It matches the Ryzen 7 7700X in gaming when using DDR5 memory, but typically delivers tier above productivity performance, especially in multi-threaded applications where it's often in the ballpark of the 7900X. In that $400-ish price range, it's quite compelling depending on what sort of things you're wanting to do with your processor. Perhaps the biggest selling point in favor of Intel right now is platform cost. AM5 motherboards are very expensive, and that hurts the value proposition for buyers looking to do a full platform upgrade. In fact, it seems this very issue is negating the future-proofing aspects to AM5. When we're talking about a global recession and people not being able to spend as much on PC hardware, things like total platform costs in the here and now become a big factor. Last update, we compared pricing for X670 and Z790 motherboards and found that generally the Intel board from the same company and series was a bit cheaper. This was enhanced by a greater proportion of Z790 motherboards below $250 US and a lower overall median price for a 700 series board. The savior here for AMD was supposed to be much cheaper B650 and B650E motherboards, which at the time we made that video weren't yet available. But B650 boards are now available, and I couldn't be more disappointed in the pricing of the offerings. Of the 26 boards currently listed on Newegg, just 7 models are priced at or below $200 US, with an average asking price of $250 and a median of $235. On the Intel side, just looking at Z790, and we have 6 options at or below $200 US. That's Z series Intel versus B series AMD. Not a pretty picture for AMD, and obviously a much better story for Intel. Now, of course, some of these cheap Z790 offerings are for DDR4 only products, while all AM5 models are DDR5, but you can still grab a Z790 DDR5 board for as low as $200 US. Not that we'd necessarily recommend that, as the entry-level models tend not to be the greatest quality, but it's at least an option. And crucially, that's not the only choice you have if you're going with an Intel upgrade. Z690 boards are an option, and there are over 70 boards to choose from on Newegg, with a median price of $250 and a whopping 26 models priced below $200 US. So right now, there's as many low-cost Z690 boards as there are B650 series boards in total. Even if we restrict this to just DDR5 boards, there are 10 sub-$200 options and plenty that we've tested and know to be decent, like the MSI Pro-A and Gigabyte Aorus Elite. Oh, and this isn't even factoring in Intel's own B series, which are compatible with the new 13th gen parts, B660 of course. All of these models on Newegg are priced below $250 US, with a median of just $140. The board we found to be the best was the MSI Pro B660M-A, which is available at that $140 median, and there's a DDR5 model for $160. There's also a variant without Wi-Fi for even cheaper. The DDR5 model ends up as cheap as the cheapest AM5 motherboard, with the DDR4 options a rung below that. So the basic summary to all of that motherboard information is that if you were doing a platform upgrade, Z790 is a cheaper option than X670, and Z690 is cheaper again. Intel also has AMD Beat for budget board pricing, with B660 much cheaper than B650. Yeah, confusing names there, but AMD's B650 isn't even giving buyers that many affordable options relative to Z690, let alone Intel's B series. Intel are easily winning the battle of motherboard costs, and this is a significant enough of an advantage that you'd gloss over the fact that it's a dead-end platform. Intel are also able to tempt buyers with the carrot of DDR4 memory support and the ability to potentially carry over memory from your current system, further reducing the cost to upgrade to a new platform. Now, in some situations, we probably wouldn't recommend going DDR4, as DDR5 can provide a performance advantage in high-end configurations, and you'll most likely be able to carry over that DDR5 memory to your next CPU upgrade. But still, Intel gives buyers the option, and AMD doesn't. Now, AM5 CPUs might have appeared more attractive in the current market were B650 board prices better. There was a lot of hope that B650 would be a lot better priced than X670 and be a bit of a savior of the AM5 platform, but really that hasn't eventuated, at least with current pricing and the boards on offer right now. Intel are capitalizing on that pricing issue right now, and that will likely continue until AMD decides to do something about AM5 value. The question mark, though, is whether AMD would bother adjusting anything with their AM5 platform, because there's an elephant in the room that we haven't yet discussed, and that's AM4. Despite Intel seeing strong sales for 13th gen processors and beating AMD comfortably in the current gen versus current gen battle, AMD is still the dominant player in the DIY space for overall CPU sales. And that's because the AM4 platform continues to be highly attractive to buyers, especially thanks to the Ryzen 7 5800X3D. If we go back and look at overall CPU sales from Tech Epiphany, The Ryzen 7 5800X3D dominates the market, and other AM4 options significantly outsell newer generation models. The 5800X3D alone in the most recent week sold as many units as 13th Gen and AM5 combined at Mindfactory, with strong sales in other regions as well thanks to discounts that have seen it priced as low as $330 US at times. That's a killer price for a processor as powerful as the 5800X3D, which is able to match the Core i5 13600K's gaming performance on an existing platform. There are so many AM4 owners right now that have switched over to AMD's platform across the last few years that it often makes no sense to consider a platform upgrade at all, especially if you're not concerned about productivity performance. For gamers that have an AM4 motherboard, the 5800X3D is drop-in compatible and just makes a lot more sense than going for a full motherboard plus, in some cases, memory upgrade. The reviews of Raptor Lake and Zen 4 confirmed for a lot of AM4 owners that the better choice isn't actually upgrading to those lines at all, but rather getting the 5800X3D given how closely it performs to newer models. So while Intel's Raptor Lake sales are relatively strong and better than some past Intel launches, AMD's AM4 platform continues to be a thorn in their side, and the strengths of 13th Gen don't appear to be enough to overcome the strengths of the 5800X3D and other Zen 3 processors. In the DIY market, there are just too many upgraders with existing PCs versus new system builders, for the new builders, where Raptor Lake makes most sense, to swing sales significantly. Of course, this will be a different story in areas like OEM sales, pre-built and boutique system builders, but for DIY sales, it doesn't appear the dominance of AMD is close to an end. The byproduct of this is that AMD's own existing parts are cannibalizing sales of their newer models. Whether this is a concern for AMD, I'm not sure, as people are still buying heaps of AMD CPUs either way, and AM5 CPUs are likely more expensive to manufacture given the increase in wafer costs for TSMC 5nm versus 7nm. AMD are usually quite flexible on prices and like to discount parts where necessary, so the fact we haven't seen much to make Zen 4 a more attractive value proposition yet suggests AMD may just be comfortable with where things lie for now. Where to from here? Well, from Intel's perspective, they don't need to do much more to convince new PC builders or platform upgraders that 13th Gen is the right choice. Parts like the Core i5 13600K, in conjunction with great motherboard offerings and prices, is already doing that job. But convincing AM4 owners to switch over and ignore the 5800X3D is a more difficult task. Productivity performance from parts like the 13700K and 13900K is an advantage, but for the large gaming market, Raptor Lake doesn't offer enough of a performance gain over the 5800X3D unless you absolutely must have the fastest system. Intel needs to simply consolidate their position, offering extremely good value, and push that further with new locked 13th Gen parts, which I believe are likely to arrive early next year. In the previous generation, parts like the Core i5 12400F were outstanding options for budget systems. Offering that again with new Raptor Lake models would be ideal. If they can produce models with similar gaming performance to the 5800X3D, but with pricing more around $200 or less, that would be very tempting even for AM4 owners. For AMD, the AM4 platform and 5800X3D remain very compelling, so they're already offering enough for owners that want simple drop-in CPU upgrades. But in other areas, there is room for improvement. AMD are a way off from convincing buyers that AM5 platform is the right choice. If they want to compete strongly with 13th Gen, they need to drop pricing for current models and make a big effort to reduce motherboard prices. Good B650 boards need to be available for around $150 US, not more like $200 now, and the Ryzen 5 7600X needs to be priced comfortably below the Core i5 13600K. If AMD doesn't want to reduce Zen 4 pricing, they need to get new Vcache models out the door as soon as possible. If AMD can offer the fastest gaming CPU on the market with compelling productivity as well, something like a 7950X3D, that would help capture the buyers that just want the best and aren't super concerned with pricing. Right now, they don't have that. Those buyers would likely choose Intel. If AMD isn't willing to cut Zen 4 pricing, they also need to release new, lower-cost models. 6-core Zen 4 should be priced around $200 US, something like a 7600 Non-X, while a new, lower-cost 8-core model would also be required. In addition to that, AMD would still need to lower motherboard prices to capture budget shoppers. Anyway, that's it for this one. Bit of an interesting update into how Raptor Lake has fared post-launch, like we did for AMD a couple of weeks ago. It's good to see that some of the conclusions that we came to in our reviews, things like the Cry 5 model being worth buying, appears to be reflected a little bit in the sales. I know Intel still has to do a bit to convince people to upgrade from a Zen 3 type platform, but for now, Raptor Lake I think has been a pretty good launch and better than what we saw with Alder Lake. So if you're interested in more of these sorts of videos and our reviews, analysis, those sorts of things, please do consider subscribing to the channel and supporting our independent testing. We do have our Patreon Float Plan accounts, links to those in the description below, where you gain access to things like monthly live streams, BTS videos, all that good stuff. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.